For the past 14 years or so, we've been very involved on how to optimize the execution of strategic projects, meaning faster, better, more predictability, which is why we followed Half Double over the past recent years. And for the past 2 years, we've been involved in Half Double projects ourselves. I would like to show you two things. First of all, talk a little bit about why we ventured into Half Double, and secondly, some thoughts about Half Double implementation. Talking about Half Double, if we look at the marketplace today, both public and private sector, there is a gap. Because on one side, you have the traditional project organizations who invested heavily in project management training, steering group training, just as we heard before, like the Coloplast example, adding more training on top within business change management, project leadership. On the other side, you have people who ventured fully into the agile domain, gone all in, and that leaves a gap. And we think that this gap is filled or can be taken by Half Double, because you basically take the best of both worlds. The good thing is also you could see Half Double as a stepping stone for a company who wants to venture in, maybe fully into agile over time. But is Half Double then a silver bullet? Absolutely not. It still requires project organizations and project managers to invest in building the necessary skills. Skills like product breakdown, estimation, and planning. When we talk about implementation, there are some pitfalls that you need to stay clear of. And I've chosen a couple here today, 6 to be exact, to discuss with you. First of all, when you are to implement a framework, like Half Double, it's all about tailoring. Of course, there are some principles, but you don't have to be rigid about it. You need to be flexible to get it to work for your organization. So let's take an example. Co-location. Co-location is great, getting all your resources at one place, in one room. But in some instances, it makes sense to go in a separate room and just sit producing. And other times, you need a team out there to do field analysis. So tailor it to fit your organization, your needs, your culture. Motivation, culture, what does that mean? Well, I'm an engineer in telecommunications. So I've been sitting in a lot of situations, and when you start to apply principles such as big room planning, that can be a very overwhelming exercise for introverts, for instance. So you need to make sure how you actually adopt your tailoring into the culture. Thirdly, finding the right pace in your projects. What I mean is, if you take your projects and your milestones and you pile them too close to each other, you don't have time to produce. If you put them too far apart, there's a risk of slack. Supporting your stakeholders now and later on is the right way to gain support over a long time, but you also need to be very clear about what their needs are, so what you do fits with what they need. An example, if we take, for instance, portfolio management. If half of your project organization reports in a traditional manner using project status reporting, using putting in data in your project systems, and the other parts have a brown paper with post-it notes, it can be quite difficult for traditional executive management to do portfolio management, because in some areas it can be pears and apples. So make sure you understand what kind of information they need in order to make intelligent decision making. In all industries, I would say there are rules, there are systemic approaches on how you should work. There are requirements. You are working in regulated environments, so make sure you don't lose your license to operate. An example, in the public sector, if you work on large-scale IT projects, you should submit your project documentation towards the Ministry of Finance. Now, if you take a photo of your wall and send that off to the Ministry of Finance, I can tell you one thing, you're going to end on top of their shit list. You don't want to be that. So you have to make sure how to actually adopt that into the real world. And lastly, it requires bold decision-making in order to succeed. Again, an example. If you want to succeed with this, this also means cutting down the number of projects you run in order to more efficiently utilize your resources. This is not a simple thing. This is a change. So half double and implementing half double is about bold decisions, it's about tailoring, and it's about implementation. Talking about implementation, just think about this for 2 seconds. What's the most crucial thing to get right in order to succeed with a project? Some of you are probably thinking, well, it requires me to have the best resources in the most sufficient amount of time. I need clear goals, I need clear ownership. And you're all right. But these are also the fundamental elements of half double. And the reason I'm saying this is that if you base your implementation alone on a pilot, which is set up for success, guess what? You're going to have success. But the risk is you create a cult regarding or surrounding this pilot, and this makes the transformation into the whole organization more difficult. So just be aware of that. And these are the dumbest of things we've been working about. So how do we actually implement it fully into an organization, understanding the systemic cultures? Like any transformation, it all begins and ends with people. Now, organizational calibration, just like I said before, there are structures already in the organization, so make sure you understand what's the skill level, what's the maturity level, what industry regulations are there to adhere to, what governance is there to be supported. Secondly, when onboarding, think about the orchestration of the whole implementation up front. Yes, the pilot, if you use that, is a part of the orchestration, but think big from the get-go. Motivation is a big driver for this, but you also need to understand what are the barriers for success, so you can actually think that into your planning and your onboarding. The most important thing for successful half-double implementation, in my opinion, is that 1, you get the value out of it, and 2, it's sustainable. And with sustainable, I mean it works also 6 months after your consultants left, also 12 and 24 months. I just want to leave you with a couple of words from one of my colleagues. And it's just to go back and re-emphasize that this is all about people. You're going in to change the behavior, the whole mindset of an organization. And also to remind you that change is an emotion. It's not a list. So if you want to hear more about calibration, organizational calibration, we have a cafe set up. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Patrick. A few questions to you. Do you think that now that you've shown the implementation model here, do you think that it would be even possible to do a successful implementation of half double without external help from consultants?
It's a good question. I'm sure that organizations can lead themselves, but I think that those of us who've done it a lot might have some tips on how to stay away from the pitfalls. So I think organizations can gain benefit from using external help.
Okay. So if they wanted to do it all by themselves, what would be the first step that you would recommend them to do?
I would recommend them to get into a community of practice, so they can share experience with people like you guys about what works, what doesn't work, why didn't it work.
Yeah. And now that you're here, I would like to draw a little upon your experience as a consultant for many years. So let's play with the idea that you're helping Half Double Institute to succeed in the best possible way. What would be your best advice to the Half Double Institute if we want to spread this concept or diffuse this concept to the world successfully? What would be your best advice to the Institute?
I think tailoring is the key word here, and tailoring into the country, specific country that you're actually dealing with. Because if you take the other best practices in the project domain, PMI, you can actually see that it's suited for the American market. Prince2, you can see that it originates from the UK. If you take IPMA, you can actually see there's a local tailoring for each country. So I think being aware and building local communities of practice around each country, I think would be a benefit.
Thank you so much, Patrick.